Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
The men could tell from the loosened attitude that the deal was an extremely important one for the Gilded Kingdom. Thus, they turned into blood-attracted flies that were driven to demand a piece of flesh from Gilded Kingdom. What a shameless bunch of people. Cantori and Elderjory could only cuss in their hearts as they nodded to agree to every single demand. On the brighter side, these representatives from the breezy plains were well aware that they shouldn't be too harsh on the Gilded Kingdom. It took half a day of a heated discussion to put all the agreement onto paper. The benefits reaped by the Gilded Kingdom were disproportionately narrowed down from what they were expecting at the start. After all, if not for the dire situation, no one would be foolish enough to sell the faction's mineral resources. Hence, Cantori tried his best to procure a few modest mines near the shore of the breezy plains and secure the ability to acquire resources with the other forces at discounted rates. They had also managed to accomplish their mission of acquiring legitimate access into the breezy plains. As long as they were in possession of these mines, they would have the authority to dispatch their forces into the breezy plains. Of course, this authority had its limits. The Gilded Kingdom would be prosecuted by all the forces in the breezy plains if they were to exceed the agreed benchmark. Yet, everyone understood that the Gilded Kingdom would only be prosecuted if there were people who dared to report them. Hence, the Gilded Kingdom did not dwell on this matter for too long. The other forces in the breezy plains gained significant benefits from the agreement as well. The Gilded Kingdom promised them wealth and technology, as well as all sorts of conveniences in marine trade. The forces left Kalan City after the deal was settled. Lin Li brought his men back to the Tower of Dusk, and the Gilded Kingdom started to fulfill all of their promises. The nautical data which Lin Li had requested was also sent to the Tower of Dusk after around 10 days. The entrance of the Gilded Kingdom brought about obvious changes to the situation in the breezy plains. Although it seemed like there was only one new addition to the breezy plains, the ability the Gilded Kingdom had was not what any forces could match. Although the conditions limited the Gilded Kingdom from deploying too many forces in the breezy plains, no other force dared to belittle Gilded Kingdom because of this. To them, the Gilded Kingdom was still a massive force to be reckoned with. It was a force that was comparable to, if not stronger than, the Tower of Dusk. Hence, Gilded Kingdom's efforts of securing new connections under the table managed to help them gather a group of forces who were not in approval of the Tower of Dusk. After all, the feeling of submitting to a larger and more powerful organization gave them a different feeling, as compared to being under a force with similar status. This helped to draw lines to the once chaotic congregation of forces in the breezy plains. One group saw the Gilded Kingdom as their leader, while the other the Tower of Dusk. Although the two groups were not harmonious, it had not created any conflict. Yet, this did not mean that the peace would be long-lasting. Lin Li was very clear that the present state of peace in the breezy plains was a mere illusion. He was expecting that a war would erupt not long after. After all, this was a conflict over territories. Gilded Kingdom would definitely not be satisfied with the current situation. He knew that the compromise shown by the Gilded Kingdom was due to a lack of preparedness to wage a war. It was the same for Lin Li. He was willing to establish a deal with the Gilded Kingdom not only for their nautical information, but also due to his lack of preparedness for a war. Although the present ability of the Tower of Dusk would not let him fear the Gilded Kingdom and Illuminati, Lin Li knew that it would be impossible for him to avoid losses if he were to have a war with them. Most importantly, Lin Li did not want to waste too much time here. He wanted the Tower of Dusk to have the ability to eliminate all of its enemies swiftly during the war, and not wrestle with them in a long and arduous process. Hence, the Tower of Dusk needed this time to grow their strength instead of entering a war in such a haste. The mages who followed Lin Li into the Sky Castle still needed to use this time to enter the legendary realm, while the rest who stayed in the Tower of Dusk had to use the time to assimilate all the energy they had previously gained from the magic tides. Hence, nothing changed as a result of the deal. Everyone stuck to Lin Li's original plans of using the resources in the tower to advance. To them, it did not matter how the future would change. What was important was the possession of strong abilities that could help them overcome and survive all changes in the future. It was the same for Lin Li. Although he had obtained the nautical data, he did not use too much time to look into them. Instead, he continued to train at the barbarous arena. If he could have the abilities of the immortal king in Garesco, it would mean that no one in Anral would be a threat to him. It would not matter whether the future entailed war or peace. Lin Li again defeated 10 powerful sanctuary-level opponents, and was faced with an ancient Wyrm. The ancient Wyrm was as powerful as Sindera the Ice Blast Wyrm. Lin Li had lost count of the times he wrestled with the ancient Wyrm. Although he had been defeated by the Wyrm countless times, he could feel significant improvement to his abilities. He started off being defeated by the beast almost instantly, and then switched to being able to withstand it for a few seconds, then minutes, and finally hours. Although Lin Li's mana saw no visible improvement, he saw drastic enhancement in his combat abilities. Lin Li had wrestled with this wyrm for 3 days and 3 nights before being defeated by it due to a moment of carelessness the last time. This time, he had enough confidence that he could send this challenging opponent back to its nest. The wyrm that appeared at the arena did not attack Lin Li immediately like before. This time, the malicious-looking wyrm showed signs of vigilance against Lin Li. It seemed to be suppressing its massive mana. It was as though its mana was accumulated behind a floodgate that could be released at any moment to destroy any obstacles in its way. Lin Li had felt that he was not the only one who had been benefiting from the arena. The abilities of his opponents had been increasing as well, albeit slower and less visibly, especially so for those opponents at the start. Their ability seemed to be stagnant, perhaps due to their intellectual limits, but this wyrm had great intelligence and showed the most obvious improvement from the arena. Although its level remained the same, it had become more and more cunning, and even learned many battle tactics from Lin Li. It was this concurrent improvement that prevented Lin Li from defeating this opponent. However, Lin Li was considered Garesco's direct disciple. The things he had learned from Garesco were not as simple as what the ancient wyrm had learned from its observation of him. Sounds of explosion reverberated in the entire arena as the battle continued. Lin Li's agile figure flashed around as he cast different powerful spells with his Helios scepter. The ancient wyrm was not a pushover, either. Its eccentric voice sounded through the arena and chased Lin Li mercilessly. Lin Li was getting more familiar with the attacks of the ancient wyrm. While it would seem a terrifying encounter to the eyes of the public, it was difficult to pose any threat to Lin Li. In reality, the strength of magic was not the only consideration for someone with his abilities. The mastery of the laws in this world as well as the ability to strategize the usage of mana had greater roles to play at his level. No one should expect him to eliminate his opponent in a single strike. His series of spells was like chess pieces of a game. The gain and loss of 1 or 2 chess pieces would affect the entire game. Each and every chess piece worked in sync with others. Their main goal was to create a subtle trap together to lure the opponent into it. The ancient wyrm created a storm with his growls. Its blinding glow created a cast over the arena, but, after the cast dissipated, Lin Li saw that he was surrounded by a dozen of solar spheres. They were blocking all the open spaces, leaving no room for Lin Li to maneuver. Each of them emitted a gust of terrifying and destructive aura. Yet, Lin Li was not intimidated by this at all. It was a tactic he had once used. Each one of those solar spheres was a powerful magic spell that had been temporarily sealed. The power of dozens of solar spheres exploding at the same time would never be as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. In the previous battle, Lin Li used that exact move to almost defeat the ancient wyrm, but unfortunately, his efforts went up in smoke because of a slight error in control. It was actually not very difficult to seal just one solar sphere, and the difficulty lay in making all of them explode at the same time, while allowing them to complement each other instead of canceling each other out. Lin Li wasn't too surprised, because he had already detected from the magical waves of the sealed spheres that the ancient wyrm had only learned to make the move seem legitimate, and there was a major issue with the arrangement of the other magic spells. Lin Li did not have to flee in a hurry at all. After casting several layers of magic defense on his body, the Helios scepter emitted a bright stream of light in his hand, striking one of the targets before the sealed sphere erupted. Almost at the same time, the ancient wyrm also detonated all the sealed spheres, causing horrifying magic spells to be blasted out immediately. However, because of Lin Li's previous action, there was a loophole in the ancient wyrm's trap. When the sealed sphere that was the first to erupt attacked Lin Li, it somehow blocked the power of the other magic spells for Lin Li. Lin Li passed through the gap in the trap immediately as the gemstone on the top of the Helios scepter flickered continuously. Like a flood, the wave of magic spells surged towards the ancient wyrm, which still had a look of surprise in its eyes. Howl. As soon as it came back to its senses, the ancient wyrm knew it was caught off guard by Lin Li, and finally let out an angry roar. In the ancient wyrm's opinion, it was obvious that it had been tricked by this tiny human again. Otherwise, how could Lin Li have remained unscathed? Unlike the ancient wyrm, which had been tormented badly. However, the ancient wyrm was different from the other beasts, after all. Despite its anger, it did not get flustered and mess its plan up. Seeing that Lin Li's magic spells were blasting hard towards it, it immediately cast its domain world. It was an extremely dim world, where the sky was filled with countless stars, while the ground was covered with countless wyrm skeletons. Intense death aura was contained in it, but there was also the aura of decay. there was also some sacredness and might. It was the dragon graveyard, which was the final home of the ancient Wyrms. It represented the death and peace of the ancient Wyrms. The wave of magic spells that Lin Li had cast immediately surged into the world of the dragon graveyard, and countless skeletons of Wyrms began growing some flesh again at a speed that was visible to the naked eye, as if he had turned back time. They then flew into the sky to deal with the overwhelming magic spells. World. Lin Li raised his Helios scepter high, and instantly opened his world domain, and a human world appeared in his domain. In that human world, the spirit of resistance of humans was fully showcased from the beginning of mankind to the resistance against all sorts of difficulties, including fights against the sky, the earth, and the Wyrms, as well as hunting magical beasts. At the same time, under the influence of the world domain, the magic spells that Lin Li cast naturally incorporated the fighting spirit of humans. The challenges and battles against the Wyrms and even gods involved a fearless spirit that allowed the power of Lin Li's magic spells to be multiplied. The collision of magic spells and the collision of worlds caused the space in the world domains to be shattered like glass. After the various violent collisions, the world of the ancient Wyrms dragon graveyard began to change subtly. Countless green seedlings had appeared on the barren land, and gradually covered the ground of the dragon graveyard, giving the dead and lonely world a wisp of vitality. In the center of the dragon graveyard, a special seedling began growing rapidly from the head of a Wyrm skeleton. It then spread out and covered everything in the surroundings, making it its fertilizer. Under the nourishment of the Wyrm skeletons, the seedling's growth became faster, and it became much larger than the Wyrm in the blink of an eye. Although Lin Li had spent a long time in the domain, everything was actually a matter of moments for Lin Li and the ancient Wyrm outside. When the ancient Wyrm sensed the problem in its domain, the inconspicuous seedling had already grown into a gigantic tree that almost covered the entire domain world, just like the fallen tree of eternity in Anral. In fact, the sky-high tree in the dragon graveyard was simulated by Lin Li using his own world domain and his understanding of the tree of eternity. In the collision of the domain worlds, Lin Li turned his understanding of the tree of eternity into a seed, which he then planted in the ancient Wyrm's domain. Once the tree of eternity grew up, the ancient Wyrm would completely lose control of its domain. For a sanctuary powerhouse, the domain world was not the embodiment of his full strength, but to two sanctuary powerhouses that were initially evenly matched, a slight loss of control of their domain world would mean the disruption of the balance. Actually, it wouldn't be too difficult for an ancient Wyrm to remove the tree of eternity from its own domain world, but a slight change in power or time consumption would be enough to cause drastic changes in the situation. Taking this opportunity, Lin Li immediately unleashed his strongest attack, and a scene which looked like an apocalypse appeared in the domain world, condensing the terrifying destructive power of the world into a lightning bolt, just like the one that broke through the chaos when Anral emerged. It blasted the ancient Wyrm hard. Boom! The ancient Wyrm did not even have time to let out a roar as its powerful body was instantly annihilated by the lightning. Peace was restored in the arena as if nothing had happened. In the arena, Lin Li was holding the Helios scepter and levitating quietly with his eyes slightly closed as he recalled the scene of the battle with the ancient Wyrm. After finally defeating the 11th opponent, what opponent would he encounter next? Would it be as terrifying as a godlike existence? Although Lin Li had reached the peak of level 27, he did not think that he had enough power to deal with a godlike existence. He might get killed immediately again. However, after Lin Li waited for a moment, he realized that the arena did not arrange a more powerful opponent for him again as before. Instead, a stone slab that glowed faintly appeared on the ground. Have I passed? Lin Li was doubtful, but he nonetheless leapt from the sky and landed in front of the stone slab. The stone slab was engraved with strange words that looked somewhat like images that reminded Lin Li of the so-called hieroglyphs. Fortunately, hieroglyphic words were not as complicated as the High Elves print. Although he had never studied them before, he was able to guess some of the meaning. The stone slab roughly recorded the development of some barbarians, but Lin Li was not an archaeologist and was not very interested in these things. What he was really interested was the fact that the Immortal King was mentioned on the stone slab, which stated that the Immortal King had suddenly descended in the tribe of the barbarians, plundered all their treasures, and then built a massive battleship, which he sailed off in while the barbarians watched in horror. Lin Li was puzzled by that information. Although the Immortal King had always done shocking things, he who controlled the Sky Castle would not have to take the barbarians' treasures to build a battleship if he wanted to explore the endless ocean. Besides, what items could there be in the endless ocean that would entice the Immortal King to go to such lengths? Looking at the time recorded on the stone slab, Lin Li carefully recalled the legends about the Immortal King, but he suddenly discovered that the time when the Immortal King left the ocean seemed to be the exact time when he last appeared in the world of Anral. Could the immortal king have last appeared in the depths of the endless ocean? That caused Lin Li to be in disbelief. After all, with the immortal king's power, he could even kill an existence as powerful as the Dragon of Destruction. The endless ocean was extremely terrifying for ordinary people, but it didn't seem to pose any threat to the immortal king. What could have caused the immortal king to go missing? After passing the test of the barbarous arena, Lin Li would still go in from time to challenge a few opponents, but his main focus was no longer on the arena. He knew that his current strength was already at a temporary bottleneck, and the barbarous arena would no longer be of much use at the moment. During this period of time, the members of the Tower of Dusk had also begun preparing for their expansion to the endless ocean. Firstly, they managed to gain control of Balboria City, which was hundreds of kilometers away from Kalan City, with the connections of the Manhwa family. Balboria City was located at the mouth of the Versa River, and was a natural harbor that was not inferior to Kalan City. The giant battleship that Lin Li had seized from the Gilded Kingdom would usually dock at that port. After gaining actual control of Balboria City, the Tower of Dusk immediately invested heavily in a large-scale reconstruction of the entire port, and established a large shipyard next to the port. With the navigation data of the Gilded Kingdom, as well as the alchemical techniques of Lin Li and Angelano, the shipyard was continuously constructing battleships for the Tower of Dusk almost all day and night. Is the Tower of Dusk really going to expand to the field of sea trade? In fact, even Gavin and the other senior executives of the Tower of Dusk were unclear about it. Besides, in their opinion, the Tower of Dusk could rely on their businesses on land to support the needs of rapid development, and sea commerce would not actually bring greater benefits to the Tower of Dusk. However, it was Lin Li's orders, and even if Gavin and the others were confused, they wouldn't dare to disobey their president's command. Anyway, the Tower of Dusk now had a massive amount of wealth, and the hundreds of millions of gold coins invested in Balboria City were just peanuts to them. Of course, the Tower of Dusk's actions had also attracted the attention of other forces, especially the Gilded Kingdom's people, who began to look nervous. Back then, Cantori and Elderjory agreed to give the Tower of Dusk the information on the sea, but they did not expect the Tower of Dusk to decide to develop their naval force so quickly. The Gilded Kingdom was far away in the sea. Once war broke out in the breezy plains, they would definitely need to get aid via the sea. If the Tower of Dusk also had a naval force, they would pose a huge threat to the Gilded Kingdom if a war were to break out in the future. Although Cantori and the others were confident that the Tower of Dusk's Greenhorn Navy definitely could, not compared to their fleet of battleships, it was troublesome for them too. In order to figure out the Tower of Dusk's intentions, the Gilded Kingdom pulled plenty of their connections in hopes of finding out something from Lin Li, the young president of the Tower of Dusk. However, after the matters of the port and shipyard were on track, Lin Li once again returned to the inverted tower of the Sky Tower, not giving anyone a chance to probe at all. In the inverted tower of the Sky Castle, Lin Li, who had already reached the peak of level 27, currently no longer needed to train himself through the barbarous arena. Perhaps he would feel some enlightenment in those battles, but there seemed to be no significant help to his improvement in strength. Lin Li, who had once again returned, mainly wanted to explore a higher level of the inverted tower, in hopes of finding a better chance of breaking through. However, what he found bizarre was the fact that the space on the second floor of the tower had been explored, but he could not find the stairs that led to a higher floor. No matter what, it seemed he could only enter the barbarous arena. However, after entering the barbarous arena, Lin Li had only experienced a few battles before getting sent out of it when he was defeated by the last opponent. Could it be that that was the end of the inverted tower? Clearly, that was impossible. Although the magic books on the first floor and the barbarous arena on the second floor each had incomparable value, Lin Li believed that it was by no means the entirety of the treasures left by Garesco. However, just as Lin Li was being clueless and was preparing to put the matter aside, he suddenly discovered that there seemed to be some issues with the stone platform that was used for storing the crystal ball after his observation through the crystal ball outside the barbarous arena. To be more specific, Lin Li could vaguely see something strange about the God's Eye Mageth that was carved on the stone platform. The God's Eye Mageth was rampant in every magic tower, and it was a common method used for monitoring the surroundings of the tower. Generally, most of them had only reached the master level standard. The difference between those and the Mageth on the stone platform was that the latter could not only be used to monitor another area, it could also record the scenes that took place on the battlefield. It could also allow one to observe and study the battle scenes from all angles. Hence, making the complexity of the God's Eye Mageth had already reached the Guru level standard. In fact, it could be considered a Guru level Mageth. However, when Lin Li saw the God's Eye Mageth for the first time, and memorized all of its functions at a glance, he stopped wasting his effort on it. After all, increasing his abilities was the most urgent thing, that he had to do at this moment. Besides, simple supportive guru-level mageths were not worth his time to study at all. However, Lin Li could not find the entrance to the next floor this time, and thus could not find another solution even if he wanted to spend more time and energy to continue improving his abilities. Naturally, he had the energy to pay attention to the aspects that seemed irrelevant. Lin Li initially wanted to take a casual look when he was bored, but after doing so, he couldn't take his eyes off it at all. Initially, there seemed to be a vague mageth with an unknown use in the guru-level God's Eye. Just like the conquering mageth and the psychic array, which shared the same mana pathway above the sky castle, the God's Eye mageth array also shared the same mana pathway with another mageth inside it. Besides, the mana pathways that the conquering mageth and the psychic array shared were the main pathways to achieve the purpose of sharing the same mana source. However, the God's Eye mageth could not be considered to be sharing the same mana pathway as the other mageth. It was as if it formed another mageth using the mana pathway, and they were in perfect synchronization. From that alone, it was clear that Garesko's skill in inscription was not much worse than that of High Lord Osric. In Lin Li's opinion, his technique of drawing mageths was already at the peak guru level, and he was probably just a step away from becoming a divine smith. If the mageth was just a magic trap, it would take Lin Li at least a month or so to resolve it. Besides, the process would involve plenty of inevitable danger. Fortunately, Lin Li discovered that the mageth hidden in the God's Eye was also a trigger-type mageth, but it was not a deadly trap. Actually, it made sense, since Garesko left the treasure to Lin Li. How could it leave any deadly traps behind? Recharging was only a test for Lin Li. Lin Li spent half a day analyzing the entire mageth, before finally realizing that the mageth contained in the God's Eye mageth was in fact more of an evaluation device for testing the mana and talent of a mage. However, it was much more exquisite. Lin Li could not guess why the evaluation mageth was so well hidden to the extent that he almost missed it. Be it magic, inscription, alchemy, or even pharmacy, it was actually all about the use of power and one's comprehension of the laws. Perhaps the power involved was different, but the laws were the same. The ultimate goal was to step into the realm of the gods and obtain the same power as the gods. Lin Li managed to discover that hidden mageth not only because he had master-level attainments in inscription, but more importantly because he had a deeper understanding and mastery of the laws after this period of honing and sharpening his skills. Hence, the hidden mageth could only be considered a test to him. If he'd discovered the mageth as soon as he entered, that would have meant that he had already reached a certain standard in his understanding of the laws, and he naturally would not have had to enter the barbarous arena to train. After figuring out how the mageth was triggered, Lin Li gently pressed his palm against the center of the mageth on the stone platform, and slowly infused his mana and mental strength into it. With Lin Li's movements, the mageth of the stone platform that was holding the crystal ball gradually became brighter to the point where Lin Li's figure vanished. At this moment, Lin Li also suddenly felt as if there was an eye that was secretly scanning him from inside out. Be it his mana, his mental strength and the sense of familiarity with the laws, or the combat experience that he had accumulated in his body, they were all revealed in the endless light. It could be considered a detailed and comprehensive evaluation of one's personal strength that no other evaluation could compare to. After the light faded, receding like a tide, a ladder-like staircase leading to the next level appeared on a wall. However, there were no turns in the stairs that led straight ahead, and Lin Li could already see the end of the staircase from below. Lin Li left the crystal ball and the stone platform, made his way up the stairs, and soon arrived at the third floor that he thought about for a long time. The third floor was not very spacious, but due to the fact that there were not many appointments there, it seemed extremely empty. There was a large alchemy array that covered the entire ground of the third floor. However, it seemed that only the mana source, in the center of the alchemy array, was emitting the light of mana, while the others were in a dormant state. They were not immediately activated because he appeared, and not a single tinge of mana flowed in the mana circuit. The alchemy array was definitely the key to entering the third floor. Suppressing his excitement and agitation, Lin Li quickly strode away from the stairs and cautiously entered the giant alchemy array to look at it carefully. The alchemy array was also closed to the realm of a divine smith. In fact, Lin Li could vaguely sense the aura of a divine smith within it. That was also the very reason that he still felt far more inferior when he was looking at the alchemy array on the ground, even though he was also a guru in alchemy. However, what shocked Lin Li even more was the fact that the alchemy array that was near the level of the divine smith, which he could not master, was exactly the same as one he saw in the game Endless World. That alchemy array in the Endless World was known as the gateway to the prehistoric times. It was the entrance to a large dungeon, which would allow players to enter a prehistoric world through the door of the outer realm. Since it was called a prehistoric world, it naturally contained plenty of terrifying prehistoric magical beasts that remained only in legends. Those prehistoric magical beasts were some of the top prehistoric magical beasts that belonged to the same era as the terrifying existences, like the ancient Wyrms and the Titans. Hence, the dungeon with the gateway to the prehistoric times was definitely the one of the dungeons with the highest rate of deaths in the endless world. However, if there was really a team in the dungeon in contrast, they would obtain huge gains even if they simply stayed longer in the dungeon. Aside from being terrifying, the beasts' bodies were filled with treasures, and as long as a team could kill a prehistoric magical beast, it would be akin to obtaining a gold mine. Lin Li did not have a guild in the endless world, but he had once had a few friends who had entered the prehistoric world with him for a few raids. However, they were individuals who were not bound by the strict restrictions of the game guilds. Hence, they would often have much to consider and be scrupulous about in such dungeons that required teamwork. Back then, Lin Li was backstabbed by his so-called friend, but of course, the latter did not get to enjoy his victory, and even got killed by Lin Li, who took advantage of a later opportunity. Lin Li had only gone to the door to the prehistoric world a few times. After all, the difficulty of party dungeons was extremely high. Even though he was already the first in the leaderboards of the game, the combat power of an individual could not possibly be compared to that of major guilds. By the time he obtained the debris of the stars and the stars of fury from the well of the sun, he saw the dragon of destruction. In fact, if not for the fact that he had transmigrated to Anral, Lin Li would have used the debris of the stars and the stars of fury to break through the door to the prehistoric world. It might just create an unbelievable record in endless world. Looking at the door to the prehistoric world in front of him, Lin Li was filled with doubts apart from being astonished. It was not that the things in the endless world had never appeared in Anral before, but they were basically always related to the immortal king. For example, the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars of fury, the endless labyrinth and the central tower of the sky castle, and the hunter's shadow and the whispering god were all directly related to the immortal king. There was also the whispering god and Prince Bahir's mausoleum. Since Prince Bahir was a suspected illegitimate child of the immortal king, he could be considered to be related to the immortal king. However, the alchemy array that was known as the door to the prehistoric world in the endless world had appeared among the treasures left behind by Garesco. In that case, what did Garesco have to do with the endless world, or with the immortal king? One was the wise man who led the human race to overthrow the high elves and was known as the god of mages. The other had a mysterious origin and had the ability to kill the dragon of destruction, as well as create a prosperous era for the high elves dynasty. Apart from being the best of the best in their respective races, there seemed to be no real commonality between the two. Of course, to Lin Li, there was a similarity between Garesco and the immortal king, and that was how they most likely had some sort of prediction of him transmigrating into this world. In fact, he even suspected that the immortal king might have been the culprit who'd caused him to transmigrate to Anral. Previously, Lin Li felt that he was walking a path that the immortal king had specially arranged for him, including the various events of him obtaining the loyalty of Norfalar, repossessing the 7 pieces of the debris of the stars, traveling to the endless labyrinth, and undergoing the test of the hunter's shadow. So far, Lin Li again felt that Garesco was the one pushing him instead. For example, he obtained the 3 treasures in the beginning, and then received the mission in the Spastime Rift. Now, he had also received the guidance of Garesco's incarnation. What kind of relationship was there between the immortal king and Garesco? In history, the two had almost surely never met. When one went missing, the other was just born. In fact, they could be considered people of 2 different eras. Yet, they crossed paths here, which was indeed rather mind-boggling for Lin Li. Of course, Lin Li was not the type to stubbornly mull over an issue. Besides, he believed that with the increase of his abilities, he would one day get the answer he wanted when he delved deeper. Hence, he soon set those doubts aside. After thinking about them for a while. He shifted his attention back onto the door to the prehistoric world. After recalling everything associated with the door to the prehistoric world that he could, Lin Li soon discovered that although the alchemy array in front of him was similar to the door to the prehistoric world, it was not complete. There seemed to be missing parts in a few key nodes of the alchemy array, which was also the reason that the alchemy array could not be activated. If Lin Li hadn't seen the door to the prehistoric world, he might have to spend a lot of effort on this alchemy array in order to truly figure out where the problem lay. However, with the memories he had now, Lin Li managed to instantly find the problems after merely comparing the 2 alchemy arrays. There were a total of 36 key nodes in the alchemy array, and their main functions were to line the 2 worlds. The alchemy array could be called the double realm psychic tower only after solving that problem. Otherwise, it would just be a useless painting, that was hung on the wall. At the thought of the power that connected the two worlds and the number 36, Lin Li suddenly remembered the 36 realm beads that he had obtained from the double realm psychic towers when exploring the Sky Castle. With the power of the realm beads and the psychic array formed by the double realm psychic towers, the world of undead creatures was opened, and endless undead creatures descended in anral through the passage. The realm beads actually did not only connect to the world of the undead creatures, their true power was used to connect two worlds. Which worlds? That depending on where they were used. The realm beads used with the double realm psychic tower was used to open up the passage to the world of undead creatures. Hence, when used with the door to the prehistoric world, it would open up the world that was predetermined by the door to the prehistoric world. Lin Li was unsure if the door to the prehistoric world would open up a prehistoric world like in the Endless World, but he was certain that he could use the 36 realm beads there. After making that judgment, Lin Li didn't waste any more time, and immediately used them on the various key nodes of the door to the prehistoric world. Fortunately, there was no sequence that he had to follow. After the last realm bead was put in place, the door to the prehistoric world immediately began transmitting mana from the central mana source to the surroundings all around. The dim magic circuits lit up, and soon the entire door to the prehistoric world became radiant. All the magic circuits and magic runes of the entire door to the prehistoric world began flickering with colorful light, as if it was a beautiful piece of art. However, Lin Li was not in the mood to appreciate art. Seeing that the entire alchemy array was about to be filled with mana, he immediately activated the alchemy array using the method that he had found and researched previously. The alchemy arrays that were carved in the ground began spinning at this moment. Next, an ancient-looking door gradually appeared in the center of the alchemy array. Lin Li was not entirely certain if there was a prehistoric world on the other side of the door. However, his power had already reached the peak of level 27, and he was confident that he would be able to retreat safely even if he encountered any dangers there. Hence, he did not hesitate much, and instead dashed straight into the door after it was completely condensed. After some ripples spread, Lin Li looked up and found that he had indeed arrived in another world. However, the scenery in front of him made him feel a sense of familiarity again. The peaks of various heights were actually the Sunset Mountains that he had set foot in when he had transmigrated to Anral. Lin Li was extremely familiar with the Sunset Mountains. Back when he had transmigrated to that place, he had fortunately been taken under the wing of Andoin. Otherwise, he would have probably been eaten up by magical beasts. When he followed Andoin and learned magic from him, he was often thrown into various corners of the Sunset Mountains to fight with those magical beasts. Hence, although Lin Li was not extremely familiar with this place, he had a strong impression of it. Why the Sunset Mountains? That made Lin Li feel a little bewildered. The Sunset Mountains of Anral were now extremely dangerous to most people, but now the peak of level 27 was considered nothing to him. 1. Lin Li could even effortlessly kill the legendary level magical beasts. Of course, Lin Li was also well aware that since Garesco had placed the Sunset Mountains on the 3rd floor, and he had to go through a detailed assessment of strength before entering, they were definitely not as simple as the Sunset Mountains in Anral. Hence, instead of dashing towards them immediately whilst in the air, he dispersed his mental strength and entered the Sunset Mountains to explore. However, as soon as Lin Li released his mental strength, a colorful liquid suddenly shot out of the dense forest below before he could even enter the Sunset Mountains. Although the liquid was spurted from the bottom, it was as quick as lightning, and it arrived in front of Lin Li in an instant. Fortunately, when Lin Li appeared, he had already exhibited an extremely powerful defensive magic spell. Otherwise, he would really be thrown into a frenzy by the sudden attack. Just as the colorful liquid appeared in front of him, an exceptionally solid elemental shield also instantly emerged from the void to shield Lin Li. Although it was just an elemental shield, it was cast by Lin Li, a level 27 sanctuary master. Hence, even if it was bombarded by legendary magic spells, it would barely be damaged. However, what surprised Lin Li was that the vibrant liquid did not get repelled by the elemental shield when it came into contact with it. Instead, it made some strange sounds, and the elemental shield in front of him was instantly eroded by the liquid, which then continued to surge towards him. Lin Li was a little alarmed by the scene, and he hurriedly activated his space robe, after which his body immediately flashed in another direction. The vibrant liquid penetrated the afterimage that Lin Li left behind, and flew for some distance before finally turning into rainwater and splattering down onto the dense forest. A large hole was immediately opened up below, followed by fumes of white smoke rising from it. After dodging the attack, Lin Li frowned at the residual smell in the air. With his knowledge as a pharmaceutics guru, he could tell from the subtle and almost undetectable smell that the brilliantly colored liquid was the legendary viper's poison. Lin Li had once helped Pope Rosario of the Brilliant Shrine get rid of the viper's poison, that had plagued him for many years, but the viper's poison that Rosario was struck with was actually only the toxin of a descendant of the prehistoric viper. Lin Li could completely tell that the viper's poison that just attacked him was countless times more violent than the poison that Rosario had had in his body. Didn't that mean that he had just been attacked by a real prehistoric viper? During the prehistoric times, the ancient Wyrms and the Titans might have fought to dominate the world, and the prehistoric viper seemed to be only a supporting role in that age. However, among the prehistoric magical beasts, there were also many existences that even those two races dared not provoke easily. There were also some that specially preferred to feed on the ancient Wyrms and Titans. The prehistoric viper was one of them. Legend had it that the viper's poison could corrode everything that existed, and not only the elemental shield that had been formed by mana. There would even be holes that could not be closed after the erosion. During the prehistoric times, the prehistoric viper had managed to stay firm at the top of the entire food chain because of its terrifying venom, and even the ancient Wyrms and Titans could not pose a threat to it. Of course, other than its terrifying venom, the strength of the prehistoric viper was not to be disregarded. Legend had it that the young vipers that had just hatched would already have legendary level power in magical domains that were composed of poison and curses. The mature prehistoric vipers would also reach the sanctuary realm. Even gods would have to be wary of them. Was it a prehistoric viper or its descendant? Lin Li soon got the answer. After the poisonous venom rained down, a large snake head that resembled a mountain immediately probed out of the dense forest, with a pair of hideous unicorn brows on its head. Glaring at Lin Li, who seemed extremely small in comparison, its eyes were like blood moons, full of menace. The fact that the prehistoric viper could poke its head out of the forest that was made up of numerous trees showed how massive it was. 1. Author's mistake. He, she, probably meant that, whatever lives there is nothing to LVL27 Lin Li. Or the author meant some lower level here since he, she, mentioned legendary LVL beasts. When Lin Li saw the huge snake head, he immediately knew that he definitely wasn't facing a descendant of the prehistoric viper, but the latter itself. Besides, he could clearly sense that the mana coming from the prehistoric viper was definitely around the sanctuary realm, and it was almost similar to the last opponent of the barbarous arena. However, although Lin Li had defeated an opponent that was as strong as the prehistoric viper in the barbarous arena, it was because he had gained a deeper understanding of his opponent's abilities after countless battles. It was Lin Li's first time encountering the prehistoric viper, and everything he knew about it was from legends. God knew how many discrepancies there were. More importantly, Lin Li did not have to worry about losing in the barbarous arena, as he would only be sent out of the barbarous arena even if he faced a lethal attack of an opponent. However, Lin Li did not think that he would have that many chances to study his opponent and experiment with it to test his conjectures here. The prehistoric viper did not even give Lin Li a chance to think, and it immediately launched a fierce attack on Lin Li after popping its massive head out of the forest. It immediately started attacking Lin Li, and colorful fumes of smoke began to emanate from the prehistoric viper's body. In the blink of an eye, it immediately enveloped the forest and the sky. Although it looked dazzling and enchanting, those who were in it would be able to feel its deadly negative aura as well as its toxicity, menace, filth, and evilness. When the colorful cloud of smoke rose, Lin Li did not dare to slacken at all. He immediately raised the Helios scepter and cast his world domain to a sanctuary master. His world domain was the strongest offensive and also defensive method. When Lin Li first cast the world domain, he created a barren world that was devoid of vitality and was essentially just like the accumulation of laws. However, after the guidance of Garesco's incarnation and the countless training and battles he had undergone in the barbarous arena, Lin Li's world domain had already become a world that constantly evolved, showcasing the entire life cycle of living beings from birth to their pinnacle, followed by death and decay. The power of such a world domain was extremely horrifying. If Lin Li were to fight with Osric again, they might actually end up in a stalemate. However, the venom of the prehistoric viper was so terrifying that even gods dared not come into contact with it easily. The curse and erosive laws were a type of power that would extinguish all existences. Pope Rosario of the Brilliant Shrine was also a powerhouse at the peak of the sanctuary realm, yet he was tortured for decades after being poisoned by a descendant of the viper. Hence, as soon as Lin Li's world domain came into contact with the colorful smoke, it was immediately corroded without resistance. The laws of the entire domain began to lax under the erosion of the poison, and when reflected in the world of the domain, it was like a huge disaster. There was a huge hole in the sky, and the ground was covered in poisonous swamps. In the blink of an eye, the entire world was full of destruction, and it seemed like it would be completely destroyed at any time. Besides, Lin Li could also sense that the poison was not only corroding his domain world, but also corroding him because he was connected to the domain. No wonder Rosario fell victim to the Viper's poison despite being so powerful. When Lin Li cast his domain world, he initially did not expect to rely on it to block out the Viper's poison. However, through the contact of the laws, he managed to understand the nature of the Viper's poison. However, the Viper's poison was indeed a bit beyond Lin Li's expectations, especially because it could spread along connections, making it truly impossible to guard against. Seeing that his domain world was about to collapse, Lin Li did not dare to delay any longer. After all, if his world domain truly collapsed, it would have a huge impact on him, the host. He immediately waved his arm to toss out the debris of the stars. Holy light. The pure power of holy light immediately formed a light of purification force field that fought against the evil aura of the entire space. Although the power of Lin Li's debris of the stars could not be maximized without the stars of fury, there was no longer a flaw in the attributes of power. However, Lin Li found it taxing when fighting against the colorful smoke. At the same time that the sinister and poisonous aura was being purified, the light of purification force field was continuously getting corroded too. The space was slowly being eaten away one bit at a time. This is definitely not going to work. Lin Li knew very well in his heart that there would definitely be a moment where even the strongest defense would get broken. Only by turning the situation around and getting himself out of a passive position would he be able to defeat the prehistoric Viper. However, the prehistoric Viper was not a clueless greenhorn. In fact, at the Sanctuary Realm, all prehistoric magical beasts, be it a viper or whatnot, would be on par with humans in terms of intelligence and emotional quotient. Since it had already gained the upper hand, the prehistoric Viper would not give the opportunity up easily, and thus it immediately intensified his attack on Lin Li. The prehistoric Viper suddenly propelled its body, which was hundreds of meters long, upwards before darting out of the forest. Enveloped by the colorful smoke, it levitated in midair. Immediately afterwards, the horn on the top of the prehistoric Viper shone brightly, and all sorts of affinity spells that contained the laws of poison and curses surged towards Lin Li like a tide amidst the vibrant and brilliant light. All sorts of magic spells that contained sinister aura like the arrow of curses, that contained the condensed power of insidiousness, the star of corrosion that penetrated through the space using the power of corrosion, and the poisonous meteorite came surging. If there were any lives in this world, they would definitely be destroyed and annihilated by the poison. The aura that came out of it alone had caused a large area of the forest to wither. The gigantic trees that were thousands of years old were quickly corroded and collapsed. On the other hand, Lin Li also fell into an extremely dangerous state. The purification force field that was supported by the holy light suddenly burst like a bubble, and even holy light itself was invaded by the poisonous gas. It was not that the power of holy light was inferior, but rather that it was impossible to release the power of holy light with mastery of the laws alone. Only the stars of fury could do it. Without the stars of fury, even a real god would not be able to fully exert the power of the debris of the stars, let alone Lin Li. If Lin Li had the stars of fury, the power would be enough to turn holy light into a sharp weapon to kill the prehistoric Viper. Lin Li grabbed holy light, and the poison that invaded it caused holy light, which was initially extremely pure, to contain a wisp of peculiar color in the light. Of course, holy light could not be stained that easily. After it returned to Lin Li's hand, it immediately purified its color. However, after that, Lin Li dared not release holy light. Even though it would not really be stained by Viper's poison, it would probably take a lot of effort to get rid of it completely if the toxins accumulated. Besides, he could tell that the light of purification of holy light would not produce any good effects after coming into contact with Viper's poison and the power of curses. Lin Li would not want to incur such losses. Hence, Lin Li put the debris of the star's holy light away and waved his arm to cast the brilliance of holy light, blocking the poisonous magic spell that was in front of him, after which he activated the power of the space robe and flashed in another direction to evade the magic storm cast by the prehistoric Viper. However, as soon as Lin Li stabilized his body, he suddenly felt a strange movement in the surrounding space, and he suddenly had a bad feeling. He hurriedly dodged and dashed towards the side. He then realized that the spot he was in seemed to be burned by wax as it formed a huge hole in the space. Immediately afterwards, the prehistoric Viper dashed out of the hole. Seeing this scene, Lin Li immediately understood in his heart that it was not the effects of the prehistoric Viper tracking him, but rather that there were holes left behind in the space at the instant that Lin Li activated the space robe. Hence, the magic spells cast by the prehistoric Viper caught up with him. It was just like digging a hole in the land. Even if one filled it up with soil, it still wouldn't be the same as the area surrounding it. It was the same for space. The magic spells of the prehistoric viper had a huge corrosive property, so the sturdier spaces would naturally be different from the more fragile ones. Hence, the magic spells actually flowed over instead of chasing after him. Damn it, just because I'm not showing my dominance, they think I'm a pushover. Although the magic spells flowed over, Lin Li was still extremely infuriated. After destroying the magic spells that were surging over, Lin Li pointed the Helios scepter at the prehistoric viper, and a huge sword immediately slashed over. The giant magic sword that Lin Li cast seemed to be extremely similar to the light and darkness sword that he used in the past, although it was also created with the fusion of light and darkness. In addition to the power of light and darkness, there was also a fusion of the other 5 basic world laws. It was no longer considered the light and darkness sword, and in fact, it was more reasonable to call it the world sword, which was as powerful as the power of the world. Even the world domain of a sanctuary powerhouse would be destroyed by it. The world sword slashed out from the void and blasted at the colorful smoke with destructive power, slashing down on the head of the prehistoric viper. When the entire space was filled with the roars of the giant sword slashing through everything, the colorful smoke that shrouded the prehistoric viper also began stirring as if it would be blown away like smoke in the wind at any time. Lin Li was very confident in the power of his sword. Previously, he had faced many opponents in the sanctuary realm and the barbarous arena, all of whom were defeated by the world sword. Although the prehistoric viper was difficult to deal with, its power was near the sanctuary realm, and what made it difficult to defeat was its poison and curses. However, what Lin Li did not expect was that the prehistoric viper suddenly retracted the colorful smoke around it when faced with the falling world sword. Immediately afterwards, a colorful snake shadow actually rushed forward to collide with the world sword. The colorful shadow, which was formed by the colorful smoke, was like a clone of the prehistoric viper. After being in contact with the world sword, it even wrapped its body, which was hundreds of meters long, around the sword. In the blink of an eye, the colorful snake shadow was wrapped entirely around the world sword, making it seem as if the world sword had been fitted with a colorful scabbard. Although the scabbard was used for protecting the sword, a large amount of poison immediately seeped into the world sword, and the laws that constituted the world sword began cracking under the corrosion of the poison. When the world sword was about to fall onto the head of the prehistoric viper, the shadow of the colorful snake immediately dispersed and reverted into the most poisonous colorful smoke, while the world sword vanished without a trace. Lin Li was dumbfounded to see this outcome. The world sword was a sword that was condensed from a world, and its power was probably the best of all sanctuary realm magic spells. He had thought of the possibility that the world sword might be disintegrated by the prehistoric viper, but the speed at which it happened was too exaggerated. The prehistoric viper did not intend to give Lin Li the time to recover from shock. After disintegrating the incredibly powerful world sword, it seemed to be enraged by Lin Li's attack. The horn on its head shone brilliantly, and the colorful smoke that filled the entire space immediately got riled up too, once again attacking Lin Li menacingly. However, faced with the attacks of the prehistoric viper, Lin Li looked a little smug. Not panicking at all, he pointed the Helios scepter forward, and the colorful smoke that had begun stirring because of the prehistoric viper once again calmed down. If one were to look carefully, they would realize that there was a vague dimness in the colorful smoke. As Lin Li triggered it, the inconspicuous dimness immediately erupted and swallowed the colorful smoke in the surroundings. This time, it was the prehistoric viper's turn to panic. Although it was roaring with fury, the dimness was still expanding rapidly like ink dripping into water, staining the colorful smoke in the surroundings. In the blink of an eye, the colorful smoke turned into dark clouds that were as black as ink. It was extremely gloomy and no longer as radiant as before. "It's my turn this time," Lin Li sneered and reached out to grab something in the air, after which the gloomy clouds began rolling and surging towards the prehistoric viper in the middle. Soon, the body that was hundreds of meters long was covered as if it was a giant pupa. Above the giant pupa, an extremely deep black sphere of light appeared in the void with 2 smaller spheres orbiting around it, like a satellite. The black sphere was the debris of the star's gloomy dark, while the 2 smaller ones around it were the souls of the double death dragons that had been sealed by gloomy dark. When casting the world sword, Lin Li had already prepared his backup solution, out of a habit that he had developed through experiencing countless battles in the barbarous arena. In other words, he would have numerous sets of attacks that he would cast consecutively, and never let himself think that he could defeat his opponent with just one move. From the performance, it seemed that the purifying power of holy light should be the nemesis of the vicious and filthy power. However, without the stars of fury, Lin Li could not utilize the power of holy light to fight the power of the prehistoric viper. Hence, he thought of gloomy dark. As the saying went, if you can't beat him, join him. Becoming one with it was definitely easier than destroying it. Under the cover of the World Sword, Lin Li cast Gloomy Dark, a key factor of the battle. It would be best if the World Sword could really kill the prehistoric viper, but if the World Sword could not exert any effects, Gloomy Dark would become Lin Li's backup plan. It was proven that Lin Li's arrangement worked as Gloomy Dark had successfully devoured the prehistoric viper's colorful smoke, and had even controlled the prehistoric viper with the power it devoured. After writhing vigorously, the gigantic black pupa finally calmed down. After the black smoke gradually dissipated, all that was revealed was a massive snake skeleton. At the same time, there was surprisingly another black satellite-like ball around Gloomy Dark, which was obviously the soul of the prehistoric viper. Generally, sanctuary powerhouses had reached the realm of having indestructible souls. That was also the same reason that Lin Li sent Ozric's soul into the endless abyss. Initially, Lin Li was still worried about how he should deal with the soul of the prehistoric viper, but it seemed that he no longer had to worry now. Lin Li summoned Gloomy Dark back into his hands, and he could acutely sense the changes in the power of Gloomy Dark. It was not considered an improvement, there were simply some changes. The three tiny balls around Gloomy Dark, especially the souls of the double death dragons, had also gained many benefits, and they were probably already near the sanctuary realm. Perhaps an opportunity would be all it took to give rise to 2 sanctuary-level Dracoliches. As for the soul of the prehistoric viper, it was truly nearing the peak of the sanctuary realm, and was now just in a deep slumber. Lin Li did not know when he could summon it. Apart from that, Lin Li also had 2 gains, which were the bones of the prehistoric viper and the magical crystal that was near the sanctuary realm. The bones of the prehistoric viper could be used to build a battleship. He reckoned that even the best battleship of the Gilded Kingdom was made out of a material that was inferior to the viper's bones. On the other hand, the magical crystal at the peak of the sanctuary realm could be used as the power core of the alchemical battleship. After placing everything in the Ring of Endless Storm, Lin Li did not immediately go deeper into the Sunset Mountains, but continued where he had left off before getting disturbed. He dispersed his mental strength and scattered it everywhere to carefully explore everything in this world. The exploration's result took Lin Li aback greatly. Although his mental strength only covered a small area of the Sunset Mountains, he managed to discover a large number of existences that were emanating sanctuary realm on it in that small amount of space. Could it be that this world is really the world of prehistoric magical beasts? Lin Li thought to himself in shock while exploring. No wonder Garesco would use something like the door to the prehistoric world. If it had been just an ordinary gate that connected 2 worlds, the sanctuary realm prehistoric magical beasts would probably have surged into Anral long ago. However, Lin Li was not frightened by the vast number of magical beasts. After all, the sanctuary realm prehistoric magical beasts rarely lived in groups, and they basically each had their own territory. Hence, there was an opportunity to take advantage of. However, Lin Li couldn't figure out why Garesco would deliberately set up such a place, since fights with prehistoric magical beasts could just take place in the Barbarous Arena. Of course, it was safe to say that there would be no battle spoils in the Barbarous Arena, unlike in this place where he could gain a large amount of wealth by killing prehistoric magical beasts at the sanctuary realm. However, that explanation was quite a stretch. Lin Li knew very well that wealth no longer mattered much to those at his level. Hence, Lin Li suspected that Garesco's true agenda for creating such a world was beyond just letting others have a hunting ground. With Lin Li's current strength, he could not effortlessly kill the prehistoric magical beasts, but it was already impossible for him to rely on fighting the prehistoric magical beasts continuously to improve his strength. What he needed now was the accumulation of mana and an opportunity to break through, which was probably impossible to achieve solely through fighting the prehistoric magical beasts. Hence, if this world was merely a hunting ground, then it might have some value to Lin Li, but by his personal standards, its value was probably inferior to the Barbarous Arenas. He believed that the items of the prehistoric magical beasts would not matter to someone at Garesco's level. Clearly, the value of the world definitely did not lie with the prehistoric magical beasts. So what secrets are hidden in this world? After killing the prehistoric viper, Lin Li did not choose to leave this world immediately, and instead spread his mental strength out. Not only did it search for the prehistoric magical beasts distributed in various areas of the Sunset Mountains, it was also trying to analyze the structure of the laws of this world. Given Lin Li's current thoughts, the only valuable thing to him here now was probably the structure of the laws. After all, the domain world created by most people could not accommodate so many sanctuary realm prehistoric magical beasts. Even just 1 or 2 would cause the entire domain world to collapse immediately. Hence, Lin Li hoped that he could acquire some knowledge and experience through the structure of the laws. Perhaps he would be able to improve his strength again after using them in his domain world. However, Lin Li's current strength was far inferior to Garesco's. It was not an easy thing to analyze the world created by Garesco. While Lin Li was racking his brains and analyzing the intricate structure of the laws, a thick cloud of fog suddenly surged out from the west. It was very different from the colorful cloud of the prehistoric viper, and it seemed white with some gloominess, with some flickering bolts of lightning. The dense sounds of thunder were also getting closer and louder with the fog. Sensing something strange, Lin Li opened his eyes and looked in the direction of the fog, only to see that rolling fog had gradually revealed a gigantic figure. The figure in the fog seemed like a robust cheetah, but it was several times larger. Its two eyes, that were glistening with a purple light, seemed to be condensed with destructive lightning. Apart from the fog, there were countless lightning bolts that resembled snakes leaping around continuously, each emanating a destructive aura. Although the prehistoric magical beast had already vanished from Manhwa for thousands to tens of thousands of years, Lin Li could still recognize its origin at a glance. The figure in the cloud was a famous prehistoric magical beast, the Tempest Beast, which was born with the ability to control the nomological power of wind. Besides, the Tempest Beast did not like being on its own. Unlike the prehistoric viper, they usually moved about in groups that ranged from a few thousands to tens of thousands. They gathered to form a cloud-like mass that covered the sky. Even an ancient Wyrm would flee far when it saw them. Purely in terms of strength alone, the Tempest Beast was superior to the prehistoric viper. However, the prehistoric viper had the most vicious poison in the world, which was daunting for all beasts, regardless of size and power. Simply put, the strength of the prehistoric viper might not have been at the top during the prehistoric times, but it still was an existence that no one dared to provoke. However, among the various prehistoric magical beasts, the Tempest Beast was definitely one of the strongest, and it wouldn't be wrong to say that it was a tyrant. Nonetheless, Lin Li did not show a single trace of fear when he saw that it was the Tempest Beast that appeared. Although his previous battle with the prehistoric viper was rather difficult, it was because the viper's poison was too difficult to deal with. Without the poison, it wouldn't take Lin Li too much effort to defeat it, hence, he wasn't afraid at all. As the cloud surged towards him, smaller Tempest Beasts also appeared after the one that was in the lead. Lin Li did not have any intentions to escape. The Helios scepter in his hand flashed, and he charged towards the fog like an arrow. The leading Tempest Beast let out an angry thunder-like roar when it saw Lin Li charging towards it instead of fleeing, making it feel extremely humiliated and provoked. After it roared, the surrounding clouds rolled up violently, and Tempest Beasts of various sizes roared at the tiny provoker too. In the blink of an eye, Lin Li was surrounded by hundreds of Tempest Beasts, followed by overwhelming lightning magic spells that were surging towards him like menacing tides, about to swallow him in a moment. However, despite being the target of the attacks, Lin Li was still smiling coldly and swinging the Helios scepter down in front of him without panicking. A flame arc was immediately launched, and his body followed closely behind. The flame slash that Lin Li tossed out casually immediately collided with the tides of countless magic spells, while burning with striking golden flames. Like snow coming into contact with fire, the magic spells swiftly melted without any sounds of the collision of magic spells. If High Priest Rog of the Darkness Shrine or Nifa, the descendant of the Dragon of Destruction, had seen this, they would probably have realized at a glance that the flame Lin Li cast was very similar to the flames controlled by the flame dragon Lothar, as it contained power that could burn and destroy the laws of everything. Of course, the flames that Lin Li cast merely contained that kind of power. Otherwise, with that enlightenment, he would have probably already reached the peak of the sanctuary realm long ago. However, despite being incomplete, this power was sufficient for dealing with the Tempest Beasts. All the magic spells that came into contact with the flames would have their laws burned away immediately. The mana that had been restrained by the laws would naturally vanish too. Before the Tempest Beasts could even react, the flame had already appeared in front of them, and the dazzling golden light did not dim in the slightest. A few of the sanctuary realm Tempest Beasts that had been attacked by the flames turned into lightning and spread outwards. However, the Tempest Beasts that only had legendary level power did not have enough strength to escape immediately. Before they even touched the flames, they already began burning up and were turning into ashes by the flames that swarmed over. Seeing that more than 10 of its underlings, which could even be considered its children, had been destroyed by the evil enemy in a short moment, the Tempest Beast King was incredibly infuriated. It roared angrily, and a world of lightning immediately appeared. Thunderbolts bombarded the flames, extinguishing the flame slash in a moment. However, when Lin Li sent out the flame slash, he followed it closely. Seeing that the flames were gradually extinguished, he immediately raised the Helios scepter, and the world sword broke through lightning. slashing at the head of the Tempest Beast King. When the Tempest Beast King saw the world sword slashing at itself, it sensed the terrifying power of destruction that it contained and roared angrily, after which two thunderbolts suddenly appeared in its pair of purple eyes, blasting at the world sword. Those two thunderbolts were not the same as the Thunder series magic spells, and were instead the creation thunderbolts that grew in the eyes of Tempest Beasts since their birth. Legend had it that the Tempest Beasts were born under the creation thunderbolt when it created the world of Anral amidst the chaos. Hence, they were born with a tinge of the creation thunderbolt's aura in their blood after their birth. Over the years, they continuously nourished it with the mana in their bodies. Once it matured and took shape, its power was probably no less than the Titan Dragon Spears. The strength of the Tempest Beast King was already close to the peak of the Sanctuary Realm, and one could only imagine how powerful the creation thunderbolt that the Tempest Beast King had nurtured with its lifelong energy was. However, the creation thunderbolt was not cast randomly at any spot. Although it was not disposable, it would cause a huge plunge in the strength of the user every time it was cast. Weaker casters might even lose a few levels of their strength. Clearly, the Tempest Beast King had sensed the power that could pose a threat to him. Finally, it did not hesitate to release the creation thunderbolt that it had been nurturing. Boom! The creation thunderbolt and the world sword collided with a loud roar, and the aftershocks and the violent tremors spread out in all directions, causing the fog to quake so much that it was on the verge of dispersing. The Tempest Beasts in the fog were in a much worse state, as they rolled and flew out in all directions. Those weaker were even shaken to death. The world sword that had been bombarded by the creation thunderbolt was clearly covered in cracks, and the incredibly solid structure of laws was almost disintegrated by the terrifying power of the bombardment. However, even though the world sword seemed to be on the verge of collapsing, it had yet to collapse in the end. Hence, it surged towards the Tempest Beast King's head and slashed it. However, the Tempest Beast King was having a hard time hanging on. The creation thunderbolt clearly did not achieve the expected effect, and even caused its body to become extremely weak at this moment. Although its strength would not be affected greatly once it passed the moment of feebleness, as its power would not be affected too greatly. The world sword that came slashing at its head clearly did not give it the slightest opportunity to breathe. Faced with this situation, the Tempest Beast King had no choice but to do its best to dodge regardless of how reluctant it was. Fortunately, speed was its strength, and despite having shown signs of weakness, it was, after all, still a top sanctuary powerhouse. If it was bent on escaping, no one would be able to stop it. However, although the Tempest Beast King managed to dodge, the other Tempest Beasts that were originally revolving around it were in trouble. They were initially still waiting to see their king show its might and destroy their enemy's attack with the Creation Thunderbolt, but they didn't expect the invincible Creation Thunderbolt to be ineffective. By the time they reacted, their king had already fled to the side, and the world sword that emitted a terrifying aura had already been slashed downwards. Although the world sword had been terribly blasted and damaged by the Creation Thunderbolt, it could not be matched by ordinary Tempest Beasts. The world sword that seemed somewhat damaged landed on the bunch of Tempest Beasts, and a large number of Tempest Beasts were immediately ripped into shreds by the world power of the world sword. Only a few Sanctuary Realm Tempest Beasts managed to react in time, and they immediately cast their wind domains and turned themselves into a part of the thunderstorm. Finally, they managed to survive under the attack of the world sword. However, even then, they also paid the price of having their domains collapsing. With blood spurting out of them, they were forced out of the storm. However, preserving their lives under the attack did not mean that they were completely safe. When the Sanctuary Realm Tempest Beasts thought that they had already escaped the ordeal, Lin Li, who was following closely behind the world sword, suddenly appeared in a flash in front of them. Without any other actions, Lin Li simply pointed the Helios scepter forward a little, after which it immediately emitted a dazzling golden light that engulfed those few Tempest Beasts. Hearing the wailing sounds coming from the fireballs, the Tempest Beast King was so exasperated that it was almost going to vomit blood. It glared at Lin Li, and the Creation Thunderbolt suddenly darted towards the latter. However, Lin Li did not bother fighting with the Tempest Beast King this time, and he ignored the burning Tempest Beasts too. He immediately flashed and darted into the group of Tempest Beasts in another direction, starting a bloody massacre. Lin Li was now at the peak of level 27. Besides, with the guidance of Garesco's incarnation, as well as the training he got when fighting countless battles in the barbarous arena, he could easily take on battles with opponents that were beyond his level, let alone wipe out the incompetent Tempest Beasts that had yet to even reach the Sanctuary Realm. They were just like ants that Lin Li could crush easily with the wave of his hand. Besides, even the Tempest Beasts that had barely reached the Sanctuary Realm were almost powerless in front of him. Watching Lin Li put his subordinates in a grinder, the Tempest Beast King roared in exasperation, and its body turned into a lightning bolt as it chased after Lin Li. However, Lin Li was just as fast as the Tempest Beast King. Besides, he also had the ability to be as quick as flash thanks to the space robe. Sensing that the Tempest Beast King was getting closer, Lin Li immediately activated the space robe and flashed to the other side to kill all the Tempest Beasts in sight. On the other hand, when the Tempest Beast King was about to catch up to the target, it suddenly felt its vision getting blurry, and it lost track of its wretched enemy. It only discovered that the enemy had scurried behind it when it heard its underlings roaring. After several rounds, the Tempest Beast King roared, and the Tempest Beasts under it immediately no longer gathered together to wait for Lin Li to kill them. The Tempest Beast King thought that since its underlings had left, Lin Li would probably go after it. However, it did not expect that even though its underlings were fast, they could not beat Lin Li, who was as quick as a flash. However, due to the fact that Lin Li had gone farther away while chasing the Tempest Beasts, the Tempest Beast King found it harder to catch up with Lin Li. In just a few moments, hundreds of Tempest Beasts were slaughtered by Lin Li, and the Tempest Beast King, which was chasing after him, was so furious that it was about to explode. It's your turn now. After Lin Li turned the last ordinary Tempest Beast into flying ashes, he turned around to face the Tempest Beast King, which was coming after him. The strength of this Tempest Beast King was actually much worse than the opponents that Lin Li faced in the later stages of the Barbarous Arena. Due to the special nature of the Wind Domain, the Tempest Beast King could fuse all the power of its subordinates into his own Wind Domain, thus allowing it to recover quickly after casting the Creation Thunderbolt. Now that Lin Li had already killed all those Tempest Beasts, and the Tempest Beast King's strength had fallen to the level that it was originally at, the Creation Thunderbolt could no longer be cast randomly. World, Lin Li hollered, and the gemstone at the top of the Helios scepter shone with a gorgeous light. The world domain was immediately cast, pulling the Tempest Beast King into the domain. Immediately afterwards, countless world swords suddenly emerged in his world, each one seemingly containing power that was no weaker than the one preceding it. If Lin Li was outside, he would only be able to condense a single world sword with his full power. However, now that he was in his domain world, he would be able to make fire turn cold and vice versa. Creating those world swords would only require the change of some laws. As soon as it saw this, the Tempest Beast King immediately exerted its wind domain with all its might, trying to break free from Lin Li's domain world. However, Lin Li was the ruler and the supreme god of his domain world. Thus, everything in the world was under his control. Since he had already captured the Tempest Beast King, how could he let it escape easily? Lin Li did not give the Tempest Beast King a chance to struggle, and simply gently pointed the Helios scepter forward a little, after which the countless world swords immediately began moving and darting towards the Tempest Beast King in the middle. In the beginning, the Tempest Beast King could barely hold on, but being in someone else's world domain caused it to be unable to receive the support of the power from the outside world, and bit by bit, its power decreased. Besides, it was fighting against such powerful world swords. After 3 successive waves of attacks launched by Lin Li, the Tempest Beast King could no longer keep its defense up. With the collapse of the wind domain, its huge body was also devoured by the countless world swords, and it was annihilated before it could even roar. Even its magical crystal was slashed into pieces, but the good thing was that they were in Lin Li's domain world, and the mana of the broken magical crystal did not go to waste. The 2 eyes of the Tempest Beast King remained intact after the attacks of the world swords, but they turned into 2 purple beads filled with lightning that were jumping around from time to time. Lin Li waved his hand to take the 2 beads, after which he infused his mental strength into them, and carefully began probing the so-called Creation Thunderbolt. The lightning in the beads was actually somewhat similar in nature to the power of the debris of the star's thunderbolt, but not as powerful as the latter. Besides, without the nourishment of the Tempest Beast King, the power of the lightning in the beads was slowly dissipating. It would probably be exhausted soon. However, it was not that Lin Li did not have a solution for this issue. He just had to arrange an alchemy array and use his magical crystals to nourish the beads to make them grow more rapidly. Of course, he could not feed them for nothing. Lin Li thought that he could turn the beads into magical weapons and install them on a battleship that he created. The power of the Creation Thunderbolt was far stronger than any other magical crystals. After putting away the 2 beads, Lin Li stood in midair and watched the landscape of the Sunset Mountains, feeling rather helpless. What exactly was Garesco trying to do by creating this world? Did he want to hunt and kill the prehistoric magical beasts like I did? Although Lin Li would not be faced with any danger given his current strength, it would be a terrible outcome if he were to go overboard and end up attracting a bunch of Sanctuary Realm magical beasts. It was not impossible. The Sanctuary Realm prehistoric magical beasts were no fools, and they wouldn't really obediently wait for Lin Li to come at them. Truth be told, if this was not the world that Garesco left in the inverted tower, Lin Li would want to turn around and leave. He wouldn't waste his precious time on meaningless battles with the prehistoric magical beasts. Even if he could gain a lot by killing the prehistoric magical beasts, the value could not compare to his time. However, that also made Lin Li feel a little bewildered. Since this was not the primordial world, why were there so many sanctuary-level prehistoric magical beasts? Especially during the battle with the Tempest beasts, Lin Li discovered that many of the beasts were still in the growth stage, which meant that they were born in this world and not captured by Garesco. That discovery reminded Lin Li of a situation he noticed just now when he was analyzing the structure of the laws of this world before he got interrupted by the Tempest beasts. The magical waves in this world were surprisingly far stronger than those of Anril, and the concentration of magical elements was rather astonishing. It was several times stronger than that of Anril, even though the latter was now affected by the magic tides. However, due to the appearance of the Tempest beasts at that time, Lin Li thought that his discovery was related to the appearance of a large number of prehistoric magical beasts. After all, among that group of Tempest beasts, not only was there the Tempest Beast King that was near the Sanctuary Realm, but also many Tempest beasts that were near the Sanctuary Realm. The appearance of so many Sanctuary-level prehistoric magical beasts would naturally result in drastic changes in the surrounding environment. At the thought of this, Lin Li slightly closed his eyes and once again dispersed his mental strength. As expected, what he sensed was the same as before. Besides, he even discovered that the mana in his body was barely depleted after 2 consecutive battles that were relatively intense. Even Lin Li, who claimed to have an infinite amount of mana, would have experienced a significant consumption of mana after going through 2 sanctuary-level battles. When he was in the Barbarous Arena previously, the Barbarous Arena would help him recover when he was waiting for a new opponent to appear. However, he was not in the Barbarous Arena now. Could it be that the reason lies in the special environment of this world? Lin Li thought to himself, only to give himself a great shock. If he had guessed correctly, the speed of the recovery of mana in this world would be terrifying. Although Lin Li seemed to have won the 2 battles effortlessly, he had also cast the World Sword, which was more powerful than the Light and Darkness Sword, twice. Each casting of the World Sword would result in a large consumption of mana. Lin Li managed to hang on and continue because he had a large amount of mana. Those who had just stepped into the Sanctuary Realm would probably be unable to continue with the battle after using this spell once. In this state, his mana had recovered at a shocking speed. What would happen if he meditated in this world of his? At the thought of meditation, Lin Li suddenly thought of the words, Meditation Land. In fact, after every mage reached a certain level, they would specially choose a place that was the most suitable for his or her meditation, and treat it as their meditation land. They would have all sorts of requirements for it too. For example, they were particular about safety, peace, and, most importantly, the abundance of magical elements. Thus, the mage could significantly increase the efficiency of meditation by meditating in the meditation place of his own choice. Of course, even if a mage were to select carefully, they would not find an incredible meditation land in Anril. The good ones were all occupied long ago by the various major forces. For example, the Sky Garden of the Supreme Council, the Holy Mountain of the Brilliant Shrine, and the Eternal Night Canyon of the Darkness Shrine. Other than those powerful forces, the mages of the other forces would also take the meditation land as an important point of consideration. The place where the Tower of Dusk was built was actually not a suitable place for a meditation land. However, Lin Li was wealthy enough to make up for the lack of a place for meditation. After obtaining the Throne of Darkness, he had more than enough legendary magical crystals, which would be enough for him to create a meditation land. After sensing the changes in the surrounding environment, Lin Li really suspected if this world was a meditation land created by Garesco. Of course, the strong magical waves and the highly concentrated magical elements did not mean that it was suitable for meditation. After all, meditation was unlike eating and drinking, where one just had to swallow the food and water. For example, after the magic tides appeared, the density of magical elements in Anril increased greatly. However, in Lin Li's opinion, it still wasn't suitable for being a meditation land of a mage, because the magical elements had been pouring into the mages' bodies by force instead of being actively guided by the mage and transformed into their own mana. That outcome resulted in the emergence of pseudo-sanctuary powerhouses. Although many of them had already broken through the bottleneck, many of those who were talented in magic were also ruined. In today's Anril, many of the mages who truly had foresight were either seizing the opportunity to increase their power, or thinking of ways to control the magical elements and suppress the growth of their mana. Hence, Even though there were powerful magical waves, and an extremely high concentration of magical elements in this world, it was still not the meditation land that Lin Li had imagined. He was not extremely certain about it now, and he would only find out after giving it a try for himself. However, meditation in the sky would definitely be impossible, as he would certainly become the target of the prehistoric magical beasts. Lin Li searched from the sky for a place that seemed suitable enough before flying over, and landing on the ground. Lin Li first laid out a large alarm array that would allow him to wake up from his meditative state in time if any uninvited guests appeared. After all, there were too many sanctuary-level prehistoric magical beasts in this world. Even if he was confident in his own strength, he did not dare to lower his guard at all lest he got defeated. After making those preparations, Lin Li could finally put his mind at ease. He sat down in an obscure spot and swiftly entered a meditative state before beginning to try absorbing the magical elements in the space. The attempt almost made Lin Li jump in fright, as it was simply too terrifying. He had merely taken the initiative to start, but the magical elements in the outside world already seemed to be surging into his body like the floodgates had been opened. Most importantly, he did not have to put in too much effort into converting the magical elements, as they were easily transformed into his own mana, as if they were already his own. It had to be mentioned that that was an extremely rare phenomenon. If the process of meditation was described with an inappropriate analogy, meditation for mages was just like hunting, where mages had to hunt and capture the magical elements in the space, and then put an effort to tame them before finally turning them into their own mana. Of course, this so-called taming also involved the issue of depth. The pseudo-sanctuary level mages in Anral now were considered imperfect because they could not achieve the desired use of mana even though they had already converted all the magical elements into mana. Hence, absorbing more magical elements did not mean that more mana could be produced. Even if all of the magical elements could be transformed into mana, it did not mean that one could use the mana effortlessly as they pleased. However, Lin Li could completely feel that the magical elements of this world were much more obedient than the ones in Anral. In fact, Lin Li did not even have to go through the taming process, as those magical elements naturally became his mana and were compliant to all his commands. This is a meditation land. It's really Garesko's meditation land. Lin Li was so excited that he almost fainted. He was worrying about accumulating his mana, but he did not expect to stumble upon Garesko's meditation land. The feeling was like receiving a pillow right when he was dozing off. Although he had only given it a try, he could tell from some calculations that the gain he would get from meditating here for an hour was almost as much as meditating for a day outside. An hour's gain was akin to a day's in the outside world. Even a mage with ordinary aptitude would become a genius mage with the help of the meditation land. Any mage who found out about such an incredible meditation land would probably go crazy. Truth be told, the Tower of Dusk was not built in a good location. After all, there were many local forces in the breezy plains, and strategic locations had been occupied by them. All along, Lin Li had been using legendary magical crystals to create a suitable environment for meditation for the mages of the Tower of Dusk. In particular, the control crystal that Lin Li obtained when he explored the Sky Castle for the first time allowed the meditation efficiency of the mages of the Tower of Dusk to increase greatly. However, now that Lin Li obtained the Sky Castle, he naturally had to place the control crystal in the Sky Castle's control center, but he couldn't possibly let all the mages go to the control center to meditate. Although the mages' meditation efficiency in the Sky Castle was astonishingly high, that was only impressive by the standards of the general crowd. Lin Li had been rather unsatisfied with that speed and efficiency, because he was the only one who knew how tight the time was. Now that Lin Li had such an incredible meditation land, he would no longer have to worry about the speed of increase in the strength of his subordinates. The meditation land itself would allow the mages of the Tower of Dusk to go through the process of mana accumulation within the shortest possible time. For example, a mage who had just entered the legendary realm would probably require at least a year or two to accumulate enough mana to reach the peak of level 21. However, if he were to enter the meditation land, it would only take a few to a dozen days. He would then be able to prepare for a breakthrough. However, when Lin Li was excitedly fantasizing about a better future, he suddenly felt a violent vibration on the ground, and he soon received an alert from the alarm array. Lin Li hurriedly stood up and looked in the direction indicated by the warning alert, only to see a large bunch of behemoths that were scurrying towards him with heavy footsteps. Damn it, the prehistoric magical beasts again. Lin Li did not curse out of fear of fighting the prehistoric magical beasts, but because their appearance made him think of a problem that he had to face. Since there were many sanctuary-level prehistoric magical beasts in this meditation land, Lin Li obviously would not feel comfortable about letting his subordinates come here to meditate, for he was afraid that they might get killed by the prehistoric magical beasts. Although Lin Li could guard them for the first 2 rounds, it would not be sustainable in the long run. Besides, if they were to really get into scuffle, no mage would have the ability to meditate in that environment. Lin Li finally understood why there were that many prehistoric magical beasts in this world. Even if he kept a rabbit in the cage, it would probably turn into a rabbit of the sanctuary realm after more than 1,000 years, as long as it wasn't devoured by the magical beasts. At the same time, Lin Li also knew why Garesco would place the meditation land after the barbarous arena. Only after going through the training in the barbarous arena and increasing one's strength to a certain level could one survive in the meditation land. Otherwise, entering in advance would simply be courting death. When Lin Li was thinking about that, the bunch of prehistoric magical beasts that had disturbed Lin Li likewise rushed to the front and revealed their true appearance. They turned out to be the behemoth beasts that orcs worshipped as holy beasts. In the world of Anril, Wyrms were known as the kings of the sky, while the behemoth beasts were known as the overlords of the mainland. They had extremely strong bodies and massive power that could allow them to flatten a hill. Besides, their defensive power was not inferior to that of the Wyrms, either. Be it with physical attacks or offensive spells, it was rather difficult to break their incomparably tough skin. There were probably dozens of behemoth beasts approaching, and the one in the middle should be their king. Their bodies were obviously taller and stronger than the other behemoth beasts. The body of the behemoth king was dozens of meters tall, and had a gilded exterior as if it was cast in gold, glistening under the bright sunlight. Its ferocious image seemed even more prestigious. The Golden Behemoth. When he saw the Behemoth King's appearance, Lin Li's face turned solemn. The Golden Behemoths were one of the most noble ones in the line of succession of the Behemoths. They were just like the royal high elves. Not every Behemoth King was a Golden Behemoth, but every Golden Behemoth was definitely far stronger than the average Behemoth King. Legends had it that during the prehistoric times, Golden Behemoths were at the prime of their prosperity, and they even once became the third largest race in addition to the ancient Wyrms and the Titans at one point. However, for some reason, the prosperity of the behemoths lasted only 1,000 years, and then they gradually declined due to the decrease in the number of golden behemoths. Based on its mana fluctuations, the golden behemoth in front of Lin Li was probably at the peak of level 28, which seemed to be a bit worse than his last opponent in the barbarous arena. However, coupled with the powerful defensive power, the Golden Behemoth definitely had the qualifications to become Lin Li's toughest opponent yet. Lin Li guessed that the group of behemoths appeared there probably because they were attracted here by the two major battles that occurred previously. Sanctuary-level magical crystals were not only useful to Lin Li, they also had a fatal attraction to other magical beasts. He reckoned that the behemoth beasts rushed over because they were intending to reap the benefits from the battles. However, regardless of the reason, Lin Li did not intend to escape, and the behemoth beasts obviously wouldn't let him off, either. A battle between them was inevitable. The golden behemoth roared into the sky, and the behemoth beasts around it immediately scattered in all directions to surround Lin Li, clearly preventing Lin Li from fleeing. However, in Lin Li's opinion, that was completely unnecessary. If he wanted to flee, he could just directly fly up into the air. The behemoth beasts were known as the overlords of the land, but even the golden behemoths did not have the ability to fly, so there was no way they could stop him from escaping via flight. Clearly, the golden behemoth did not know that the small, wingless figure in front of it could fly away from its head at any time. Seeing that its underlings had already surrounded Lin Li, it immediately launched an attack on Lin Li nimbly. In the blink of an eye, it was already in front of Lin Li, and its massive claws were almost covering the sky above Lin Li's head. It then smashed downwards forcefully with a loud boom, boom, with a deafening sound and a violent tremor. The golden behemoth formed a huge pit in the ground, and it was as if a meteor had hit the ground. Of course, Lin Li would not be killed that easily, and his body had already shot out like a sharp arrow right before the golden behemoth's claws landed. However, the elemental shield on his body had also been struck by the debris darting everywhere, and was shaking uncontrollably. That situation made him feel flabbergasted. The debris propelled upwards was as powerful as legendary-level magic spells. The elemental shields of ordinary mages probably would not be able to sustain such attacks. While flying, Lin Li suddenly turned over and pointed the Helios scepter at the golden behemoth, after which a burst of golden flames surged towards the golden behemoth. With the appearance of the golden wave of flames, the surrounding temperature suddenly soared, causing the trees to be charred, and the ground in the path of the flames had turned into red-hot lava. However, in the face of such a terrifying wave of flames, the golden behemoth had no intention of dodging, and it chased Lin Li instead. Its massive body bulldozed through the flames with a loud boom. If it had been some other magical beast, it would have been burnt into ashes. Even ancient Wyrms probably wouldn't dare to go hard against it. However, the golden behemoth's gilded figure was intact, and even its fur was not burnt by the fire. Fortunately, Lin Li's mental condition was tough enough for him not to be frightened by this terrifying scene. When he saw the golden behemoth charging out from the flames, he immediately turned around and flew in another direction without hesitation. Lin Li's strategy was the same as in the last battle, and that was to kill the ordinary behemoths before focusing on battling the golden behemoth. However, although there were no sanctuary-level behemoth beasts, their skin were all thick and coarse, thus making it difficult to deal with them. Lin Li was not afraid of agile opponents like the tempest beasts, which he could easily defeat as long as he seized the right opportunity. However, beasts with thick skin like the behemoth beasts were quite a headache for Lin Li. Even if he bombarded them with powerful magic spells, it would only produce a tenth of the results that he would usually obtain. In order to kill them, he would have to put in 10 times the effort. Lin Li rushed to 2 behemoths and pointed the Helios scepter forward, after which 2 thunderbolts that had the diameter of a bucket blasted the heads of the behemoth beasts. However, they simply shook their heads. They had merely become giddy from the attack. Besides, they soon came to their senses and roared as they swung their claws at Lin Li. Damn it, Lin Li cursed and thrust the Helios scepter into the ground forcefully, after which 2 sharp stone spikes suddenly emerged from the ground. His goal was the stomachs of 2 behemoth beasts. In Lin Li's opinion, no matter how coarse their skin was, their stomach would definitely be their weakness. The sharp stone spikes could poke holes in steel, let alone bodies made of flesh. However, the outcome made Lin Li realize that he should never treat the bodies of the behemoth beasts as flesh. The 2 sharp stone spikes merely overturned the 2 behemoth beasts and left a white mark on their abdomens without causing any bleeding at all. At this moment, the golden behemoth had already caught up with Lin Li, thus leaving him with no choice but to temporarily give up attacking the 2 behemoth beasts and launch his space robe immediately. He then flashed in another direction. However, this time, Lin Li also knew how tough the skin of the behemoth beasts was, and thus did not inspect or test it any further. Instead, he immediately whipped out the light and darkness sword and slashed the behemoth beasts without any mercy. The defensive power of the behemoth beasts was definitely at the top in the entire annual. Although Lin Li's light and darkness sword allowed him to easily kill a few behemoth beasts in one fell swoop, it was not as easy as slashing and chopping them up. None of the behemoth beasts that died were dismembered. They had all died because their internal organs were destroyed by the light and darkness sword. Besides, the light and darkness sword was considered one of the most powerful weapons that Lin Li had. Other than its astonishing power, it also had a high consumption of mana. Usually, Lin Li would use the light and darkness sword only when facing opponents that were in the sanctuary realm. However, he had to use it on the behemoth beasts that had yet to reach the sanctuary realm. Fortunately, this world was the meditation land of Garesco, and the surrounding magical elements were extremely abundant. Casting the light and darkness sword was not too taxing for Lin Li. However, he was particularly displeased because it was a waste of his powerful sword, yet he would not be able to kill the behemoth beasts without using it. Lin Li continuously launched powerful attacks in front, bombarding the behemoth beasts surrounding him while the golden behemoth roared in anger and chased after him. Unfortunately, the golden behemoth was slow even though it was not clumsy. As long as Lin Li put his mind to it and focused on dodging, the golden behemoth could only chase after him. The golden behemoth did not bring many behemoth beasts with it, although dozens of behemoth beasts was definitely a staggering number in Anral. They only managed to last for a second under Lin Li's full swing massacre before being slaughtered. At this moment, Lin Li was finally willing to face the golden behemoth, but it had become even more terrifying this time. Seeing its underlings killed one by one in front of it, the golden behemoth would have exploded in anger if not for its thick skin. At this moment, the golden behemoth's body was emanating raging flames, and dense dark gold ancient runes began to appear on its skin, causing the surrounding air to be dyed with a golden halo, as if shrouded in a golden mist. Seeing the changes the golden behemoth was undergoing, Lin Li knew that he had gone too far this time as he caused the golden behemoth to advance in a state of anger. He wondered if any of the behemoths he killed were the mates or children of the golden behemoth. Of course, even if the golden behemoth suddenly advanced, it would not make Lin Li feel terrified. He would at most regard it as his last opponent in the barbarous arena. Before the golden behemoth moved, Lin Li swung the Helios scepter, and a 6-pointed star ray appeared in front of him, followed by a ray of divine punishment thunder, which blasted at the chest of the golden behemoth. The power of the divine punishment thunder was enough to destroy a mountain peak, but Lin Li knew that it could not hurt the golden behemoth at all. What he needed was to make the golden behemoth feel numb because of the lightning. If other mages found out that Lin Li had cast such a top legendary level magic spell, for for the sake of achieving an anesthetic effect. They would probably fly into a rage and scold him for being a wastrel. However, Lin Li knew that given the high defensive power of the Golden Behemoth, low-level Thunder Series magic spells would not bring him the result he wanted at all. Only magic spells like the Divine Punishment Thunder would be likely to affect the enemy. Among all the elemental magic spells, Thunder Series magic spells had always been known for their sharpness and power. Their attacking speed was similar to that of the Holy Light magic spells, and it was almost impossible for one to evade it unless they could move in a flash like Lin Li, or attach their bodies to the void. Due to their destructive nature, the power of the Thunder Series magic spells surpassed their counterparts. At the same time, Thunder Series magic spells also came with paralyzing effects that would usually decide the outcome during an intense battle. From that point alone, Thunder magic spells seemed to be the best option for mages. However, nothing in this world was perfect. Despite having such an attribute, Thunder magic spells had never been the mainstream magic spell for the ages. The greatest reason was the difficulty in casting. Although it was said that one would never be able to evade once their opponent cast Thunder Series magic spells, and would suffer great damage, the casting duration was rather long. Hence, the process of spell casting might easily be interrupted by the opponent. If magic could not be cast, what was the point of it being powerful? Thus, ice element magic that was powerful enough and easy to cast was the favorite among the mages. However, for someone at Lin Li's level, it was almost no longer a problem. Sanctuary masters had already reached the stage of being able to cast instantaneous magic spells thanks to their mastery over and familiarity with all sorts of laws. For most sanctuary mages, casting spells was as simple as developing a thought, unless they were spells that were near the god level like the one Garesco had left behind for sealing the Spastime Rift. Only those would require incantations or the condensation of mana. In particular, Lin Li himself developed in the direction of mastering the world laws, unlike most sanctuary masters who chose to focus on a single domain. Now, he could create a world domain, and had mastered the various world laws to a significant extent. Magic spells like the Divine Punishment Thunder would not be difficult for him. The Golden Behemoth did not have any time to react, and a purple golden thunderbolt that had a holy and menacing aura immediately bombarded its massive body. Countless snake-like arcs of lightning immediately darted out of the Golden Behemoth's body and leapt around with cackling sounds. Its appearance alone was hair-raising. The Divine Punishment Thunder was absolutely powerful, as its name suggested. However, as Lin Li had expected, after the Golden Behemoth was hit by the Divine Punishment Thunder, Lin Li realized that it did not actually cause any damage to the Golden Behemoth's body upon closer inspection. However, Lin Li did not expect the Divine Punishment Thunder to be able to strike the Golden Behemoth down in one go. Despite the powerful magic defense of the Golden Behemoth, the Divine Punishment Thunder could bring about the numbing effect that he wanted. That fact alone was considered extraordinary. However, Lin Li did not carry high hopes for that small request. After all, luck had never been reliable, and real strength was the deciding factor. Hence, after casting the Divine Punishment Thunder, Lin Li did not stop to check the situation. Instead, he followed the figure straight up into the sky. At the same time, a large amount of mana in his body surged into the Helios scepter rapidly, causing the gemstone on the tip of the scepter to emit a dazzling light. The light almost shrouded his body as if a small sun had risen in mid-air. At the same time, Lin Li had acutely sensed that the Golden Behemoth had indeed been very unfortunate to have entered a state of numbing under the blast of the Divine Punishment Thunder. Although the duration only lasted for a pathetic 1/10 of a second in the face of the Golden Behemoth's resistance, that was already an extremely wonderful opportunity for Lin Li. Lin Li knew that he had to seize the opportunity. Hence, he immediately pointed the Helios scepter downwards, while the light from the gemstone immediately began condensing and turning into a giant sword that could split the world open. It then slashed at the Golden Behemoth that was in a state of paralysis. Although it was also a world sword, Lin Li had put in more mana into this sword than usually. Even mountains that were made of steel would be slashed and broken by the sword. Even the strongest fortress in Anral would be cut into half by it. However, when the powerful sword that would amaze and intimidate everyone first appeared in the world, it suffered a huge setback because of the Golden Behemoth's body. The blade of the giant sword slashed at the huge head of the Golden Behemoth, making a deafening sound that sounded as if heaven and earth collapsed. However, the Golden Behemoth had merely slipped into the mud, and the shock wave generated by the strong collision caused a large pit that was a few meters deep to form in the ground. The trees in the surroundings quaked and fell in all directions, forming a terrifyingly massive blank area. On the other hand, the world sword that condensed all the world laws that Lin Li had mastered appeared to be as fragile as glass after challenging the golden behemoth's strong defensive power. It was immediately covered in dense cracks, and countless fragments even fell off and flew around. 1. It's a Chinese pun. Thick skin refers to being shameless. Although each shard that splattered was only the size of a fingernail, it would cause a ground-shaking explosion when it fell into the surrounding forest, and its power was probably not inferior to that of legendary-level magic spells. It was clear how terrifying of a power the world sword contained. However, despite being terrifying, it could not compare to the golden behemoth, which was simply devastating. This is outrageous. Upon sight of that, Lin Li's eyeballs were almost going to fall out. Even an ancient wyrm would be cut into pieces when it collided with his world sword. However, the sword which seemed to be able to split the world open could not give the golden behemoth a single wound at all. Lin Li had already known that the golden behemoth's defense was incredibly high, but he had not expected it to be so high that even a full-blown attack of his could not break it. How could he continue? Lin Li was incredibly frustrated. Do I really have to flee from the sky? Howl. Although the golden behemoth wasn't heavily injured by Lin Li's world sword, having a strong defense didn't mean that it was numb to pain. Clearly, the blow from the world sword made the golden behemoth experience unprecedented pain, which surprisingly caused it to go berserk when coupled with the anger of having its underlings get killed. After the deafening roar, the golden behemoth's aura was raised to a greater height, and the golden light that its body emitted became even more substantial. It was as if it was shrouded in a layer of golden mist. Immediately afterwards, the golden behemoth suddenly jumped out of the large pit and swung its massive front claws as they smacked hard against the world sword. Boom! A series of explosions sounded. In less than a second, the golden behemoth blasted the world sword dozens of times. Initially, the world sword was already covered with cracks because of the recoil, and it could be considered to be barely maintaining its form of a giant sword. However, the golden behemoth's crazy attacks caused the laws of the world sword to eventually disintegrate until it became unrestrained. The massive amount of mana erupted in an instant too. The world sword contained almost half of Lin Li's mana, and all the laws that constituted the world. After being blown apart by the golden behemoth, all of its power erupted like a nuclear bomb. Amidst the massive and deafening roar, as well as the violent shaking of the world, a large mushroom-shaped cloud rose in the air. Even Lin Li, who was standing in mid-air, was unable to stabilize his body under the powerful impact. He had no choice but to retreat continuously. By the time he finally stabilized his body, he looked at the giant mushroom-shaped cloud, only to gasp in shock. This time, Lin Li finally understood why the behemoths could contend with the ancient wyrms and the titans under the lead of the golden behemoths. If there were enough of such golden behemoths in the prehistoric times, it probably would have been possible to annihilate the ancient wyrms and titans. Just as Lin Li was being incredibly astonished by the toughness of the golden behemoth, he was suddenly alarmed, and he almost subconsciously activated the flashing power of the space robe. Almost at the same time, a golden figure emerged from the mushroom-shaped cloud that had yet to disperse, and darted towards Lin Li like a cannonball. When Lin Li's figure appeared in another location, he saw a wisp of shadow that he had left in his original position, being dispersed by the golden behemoth. Lin Li couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat because of that scene. He didn't think that he would be able to withstand the golden behemoth's slap. Although the golden behemoth couldn't fly, its strong body and jumping abilities could not be ignored. Lin Li had originally been already hundreds of meters above ground, but the golden behemoth managed to catch up with him after just taking one leap. However, as soon as Lin Li opened his eyes, he saw the golden behemoth that had a ferocious gaze. With a roar of indignation, it crashed like a golden shooting star. However, in less than a minute, the giant golden cannonball shot up again. I'll evade again. At the thought of it, the flashing function of the space robe was activated once again, leaving an afterimage of the golden behemoth in the same place. The front claws of the golden behemoth dispersed Lin Li's afterimage with a gust of wind. The golden behemoth was filled with fury, and its gilded body seemed to be covered in a layer of red. However, no matter how angry and indignant it was, it could only stare at Lin Li ferociously from afar as it turned into a meteor and fell to the ground. In fact, Lin Li's heart was also full of helplessness as he watched the golden behemoth fall to the ground. He didn't want to continue struggling with the golden behemoth either, but the other party's defense was simply incredible. Even the world sword could not bombard it, and it wasn't an easy thing to kill the other party. Of course, if it really reached the point where it was a life and death battle, Lin Li would still have a way to kill the golden behemoth. However, the problem was that this was, after all, different from the battle that he had with Osric in the control center of the Sky Castle back then. Lin Li had another way out, and it was only just a matter of choice. Hence, Lin Li now wanted to kill the golden behemoth, but he didn't want to pay too high of a price, which resulted in a somewhat awkward situation, where they could not hit each other or do anything to each other. Yet both of them refused to give up just like that. The golden behemoth's body was indeed very strong. When it fell from a height of hundreds of meters, there was no buffer when it came into contact with the ground. In fact, it even got propelled into the air again by the rebounding force. When looked at from afar, one would see streams of golden light being continuously launched into the air. Lin Li flashed several times in mid-air, and felt that the mana that he had used up when casting the world sword was almost restored in a short period of time. He couldn't help but sigh again. Garesco's meditation land was truly incredible. Only a meditation land as such could give rise to so many incredible prehistoric magical beasts. He updates T and Vel, by, calm, damn it. I refuse to believe that there isn't a single weak spot in your body. Seeing that the golden behemoth was wailing and propelling itself upwards again, Lin Li did not flash again. Instead, he dodged towards the side a little, while a ball of light emerged from the Helios scepter in his hand at the same time. Bolts of lightning appeared in the air, forming a huge destructive thunder purgatory that trapped the golden behemoth. However, the destructive thunder purgatory was just like a weak cobweb in the face of the golden behemoth, which managed to tear it into pieces with a swing of its claws. Nonetheless, it managed to offset some of the golden behemoth's upward force this time. After all, it was only relying on its jumping power, and could not really stay in the air. Immediately afterwards, the Helios scepter flashed again, and a world sword, that was far inferior to the one from before yet was much more insidious, appeared below the golden behemoth. The area that the sword was pointing at was the golden behemoth's, an asterisk S. It was not that Lin Li was perverted, but he really couldn't think of any other spot in the golden behemoth's body that could be considered a weakness to be exploited. Of course, the golden behemoth's eyes should be considered a weak point in its defense, but the problem was that the golden behemoth was not a fool. How could it allow anyone to poke its eyes? Now that the golden behemoth was in a moment of rage, it leapt into the air and attacked Lin Li without caring about anything else, thus giving Lin Li a chance to attack. Otherwise, if the golden behemoth were to stay on the ground, Lin Li might not really have the opportunity to attack that spot. After the world sword appeared, it did not attack the golden behemoth, and instead hovered in midair, waiting for the falling golden behemoth to sit up. It was an utterly shameless move, but of course it would only work if the golden behemoth took the bait. Generally speaking, no matter how great the power one might have, there would be no way one could exert it in midair without an ability to fly. Hence, the golden behemoth could not stop itself from falling, and could no longer change the trajectory of its fall, especially since its body was so huge. The sheer size of its body caused it to fall quickly, and there was no time for it to adjust its posture at all. Finally, under Lin Li's close attention, the golden behemoth's buttocks collided with the world sword. Truth be told, Lin Li could not tolerate the sight at this point anymore. It was simply a tragedy. However, there was no piercing sound this time. Seated above the blade of the world sword, the golden behemoth fell together with it. Besides, due to the fact that the world sword had an upward force, it seemed to hold the golden behemoth up, and thus it didn't fall to the ground as fast as it did just now. Are you kidding me? It has such a strong defense in that spot too. Lin Li dared not believe his eyes at all. Of course, in reality, Lin Li could already feel from the world sword that he controlled that a layer of power was shrouded around the golden behemoth, and was the very same power that blocked the world sword. That power was the golden light on the golden behemoth's body, which resembled the combat energy of the sword sages. However, if one looked closely, one would find that each particle that converged into the golden light was an ancient mysterious rune that contained a powerful force. Not only did Lin Li's world sword not manage to break through that layer of power and pierce the golden behemoth's body, it was gradually eroded and contaminated by the ancient mysterious runes that caused that power to be even stronger. Noticing this problem, Lin Li was beyond frustrated. It was no longer a problem of the thickness of its skin, but rather that the layer of power caused the golden behemoth to have no weakness at all. Lin Li believed that even if he could find a way to stab the golden behemoth's eyes, the result would probably be exactly the same as now. Damn it, this is forcing me to do it brutally. Lin Li gritted his teeth furiously, and waved his hand to remove the world sword that was stabbed under the golden behemoth's buttocks. At the same time, he raised the Helios scepter with his other hand, and instantly opened his world domain. Immediately afterwards, he saw a black and white solar sphere that quickly emerged from his world domain before darting towards the golden behemoth that was still in midair. The black and white solar sphere was the combination of light and darkness, just like the angels of light and dark that Lin Li had once created. As long as the balance of power of light and darkness was slightly altered, the conflict between the two powers would trigger a violent explosion. However, the power of this explosion was definitely not enough to be used against the Golden Behemoth. After all, even a full-blown strike with Lin Li's world sword could not break the defense of the Golden Behemoth. However, Lin Li did not intend to blast the Golden Behemoth to death, and instead had another plan in mind. One by one, black and white solar spheres began blasting at the Golden Behemoth in mid-air, and sent violent explosions around its huge body. Of course, the explosions could not break the Golden Behemoth's defense, but how could it not fall when being bombarded hard in mid-air? Through the analysis of the mysterious ancient runes, Lin Li discovered a secret in the Golden Behemoth's body, and that was that the mysterious ancient runes had a subtle connection with the laws of the earth. Although they did not belong to the laws of the earth, they acted as a constant source of power for the Golden Behemoth, which allowed the Golden Behemoth to remain highly resistant to attacks. There was almost no limit to the defensive power of the Golden Behemoth, which was on the ground. No matter how strong the blow might be, it would be able to increase its defensive power as long as it was on the ground. As long as the earth was not destroyed, its layer of defense would never be broken unless its connection with the earth was broken. Lin Li was also inspired by the scheming and perverted move just now. If he wanted to make the Golden Behemoth lose contact with the earth, he naturally had to keep it in the air. Therefore, Lin Li came up with such a move to make sure that the Golden Behemoth never touched the ground. Of course, even if its connection with the earth was momentarily severed, it did not mean that the Golden Behemoth's defense would immediately crumble. Unless Lin Li used such a means to keep the Golden Behemoth in the air, its defense would probably take a year or two to weaken. However, Lin Li did not have that much time to spend with the Golden Behemoth. Hence, after keeping the Golden Behemoth in the air, he put away the Helios scepter and replaced it with a silver crossbow that was covered in dark gold maggots. The crossbow was the crossbow reincarnation that he had specially created to mimic the characteristics of the Stars of Fury so as to match the debris of the stars.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.